The rain had finally stopped after 3 days of downpour, leaving the countryside damp and misty. Lily Chen drove slowly along the winding road, her old station wagon's tires splashing through puddles that reflected the gray sky above. As a historical photographer with 10 years of experience, Lily had seen her fair share of abandoned places, but something about this trip felt different. The small town of Pine Creek had once been a bustling mining community back in the 1950s, but as the mines closed and jobs disappeared, so did the people. Now it was just another dot on the map that most folks drove past without a second glance. Lily, however, had a keen eye for forgotten stories, and Pine Creek had plenty of those to offer. She pulled over to check her map, the paper now wrinkled from constant folding and unfolding throughout her journey. According to her research, there should be an old funeral home somewhere along this stretch of road. Hartman's Funeral Services, closed down in 2004 when the owner died with no one to take over the business. Should be just around this bend, Lily muttered to herself, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Her camera bag sat heavy on the passenger seat, full of equipment she'd need to document yet another piece of America's fading past. As you? She rounded the curve. The building came into view, a large Victorian-style house with peeling white paint and shutters hanging crookedly from several windows. A faded sign, barely readable through years of weather damage, confirmed she'd found what she was looking for. Lily parked in what used to be the funeral home's lot, now overgrown with weeds pushing up through cracks in the asphalt. She sat for a moment studying the building. Unlike most abandoned places she'd visited, this one hadn't been touched by vandals. Its remote location had protected it from spray paint and broken windows that typically marked forgotten buildings. She stepped out of her car, the humid air immediately clinging to her skin. Grabbing her camera bag and a small backpack containing water, a flashlight, and a first aid kit, Lily approached the building. The wooden steps of the front porch creaked under her weight, and she paused, listening for any sounds that might suggest she wasn't alone. Nothing but the distant call of birds and the occasional drip of water from the roof. The front door was locked, but Lily had long ago learned that abandoned buildings rarely kept all their entrances secure. She made her way around the side, careful of her footing on the slippery ground, and found what she expected: a service entrance with a door that had warped over time, leaving just enough space to work it open. "Hello?" she called out as she stepped inside, more out of habit than actual expectation of a response. The air inside was thick with dust and the peculiar smell of old buildings, a mixture of mildew, aged wood, and something chemical that was probably leftover embalming fluid. Lily pulled out her flashlight, sweeping its beam across what appeared to be a back hallway. Dust particles danced in the light, swirling like tiny galaxies disturbed for the first time in years. She took out her camera, an old Nikon that had seen almost as many abandoned places as she had, and began documenting the space. The peeling wallpaper, a clock forever stopped at 3:17, a desk calendar still turned to March 2004. The funeral home was larger than it appeared from outside, with several rooms branching off from the main hallway. There was a viewing room with chairs still arranged in neat rows, facing an empty space where a casket would have been displayed. An office with papers still scattered across a desk, as if the owner had just stepped out for lunch and never returned. A small kitchen area with coffee cups in the sink, now stained brown with age. But it was the preparation room that truly captured the essence of the abandoned funeral home. Metal tables gleamed dully under Lily's flashlight, and cabinets lined the walls, some still containing bottles of chemicals with faded labels. This was where the dead had been prepared for their final viewing, where they'd been made to look peaceful for their grieving families. "Quite the time capsule," Lily whispered, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silent building. She took her time photographing every detail: the tools laid out on trays, instruction manuals for embalming techniques, even an old radio that had probably provided background noise for the funeral director as he worked. As fascinating as the preparation room was, Lily felt a growing unease the longer she stayed there. She'd never been squeamish about death. Her line of work made that impossible, But something about this place felt heavier than other abandoned buildings. Perhaps it was knowing how many people had passed through here on their final journey. She was about to leave the room when her flashlight caught something peculiar, a door she hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind a rolling supply cabinet. Curious, Lily moved closer, pushing the cabinet aside with some effort. The door was small, more like an access panel than a proper entrance, with a simple latch rather than a doorknob. "Now what were you hiding back here, Mr. Hartman?" she murmured, running her fingers along the edge of the door. It wasn't locked, just stiff from years of disuse. Lily worked the latch free and pulled, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. A basement, not unusual for an old building like this, but the hidden nature of the entrance made Lily's pulse quicken with interest. She shone her flashlight down the stairs, revealing nothing but dust and cobwebs. After a moment's hesitation, she began her descent, testing each step carefully before putting her full weight on it. The basement was surprisingly large, stretching beneath the entire building. Unlike the floors above, which had at least some natural light filtering through dirty windows, this space was pitch black beyond the reach of her flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing sections of the basement bit by bit. Storage shelves filled with dusty bottles, stacks of old funeral programs, and several large filing cabinets that presumably contained records of the funeral home's operations. Lily moved deeper into the basement, her footsteps echoing slightly despite the dust that muffled most sounds. Her flashlight beam caught something in the far corner, something that didn't match the straight lines of shelving and cabinets that filled the rest of the space. As she drew closer, the shape became clearer. A casket, not stored vertically, as unused caskets typically would be, but laid out horizontally on a low platform, as if prepared for a viewing. It was made of dark wood with ornate carvings along its sides, a high-end model that would have cost a grieving family several $1,000s. Why would they leave this down here? Lily wondered aloud, approaching slowly. Funeral homes didn't typically store filled caskets in their basements. Bodies were prepared, viewed, and then transported to their final resting place without much delay. As she circled the casket, Lily noticed several things that made the situation even stranger. There was a layer of dust on the casket. Yes, but it wasn't as thick as the dust on everything else in the basement, and there were what appeared to be scratch marks on the floor around the platform, as if the casket had been moved there relatively recently, perhaps just before the funeral home closed. More disturbing was the casket itself. The lid wasn't fully closed. A small gap, no more than an inch, ran along one side as if someone had begun to open it but stopped or hadn't properly sealed it shut. Lily stood there for a long moment, her camera forgotten in her hands, as she considered what to do. The logical part of her brain told her to leave it alone. This wasn't her business, and disturbing a possibly occupied casket wasn't just disrespectful, it could be illegal. But another part of her, the part that had driven her to explore abandoned places for over a decade, wondered about the story behind this casket. Why was it here? Why had it been left behind? "I'll just take a few photos," she decided, raising her camera. "Document it as I found it, then report it to the proper authorities." She took several shots from different angles, capturing the casket, its position in the basement, the scratch marks on the floor. But even as she lowered her camera, Lily knew that photos wouldn't be enough. She couldn't leave without knowing. The gap in the lid seemed to taunt her, promising answers to questions she hadn't even fully formed yet. With a deep breath, Lily set down her camera and backpack. She wiped her suddenly sweaty palms on her jeans and approached the casket again. Her heart pounded in her chest as she placed her hands on the cool wood of the lid. It was heavier than she expected, requiring real effort to lift. The hinges creaked loudly in the silent basement as Lily slowly raised the lid, her flashlight propped against her backpack to illuminate whatever she might find. She held her breath, prepared for the worst. A forgotten body, perhaps badly decomposed after all these years. What she saw instead made her gasp, taking an involuntary step backward. The casket wasn't empty, but it didn't contain a body. Instead, it was filled with dozens of small objects, carefully arranged inside the satin-lined interior. photographs, jewelry, small books that looked like diaries, and beneath them, what appeared to be stacks of documents, yellowed with age, but clearly preserved with great care. Lily leaned closer, her initial shock giving way to intense curiosity. This wasn't a burial casket. It was a storage container, a hiding place for items of obvious importance. But why hide them in a casket in a basement? And who had put them there? As she carefully lifted one of the photographs, showing a young couple standing in front of the very funeral home she was now exploring, Lily had no idea that she had just stumbled upon a mystery that would consume her life for years to come, or that the contents of this abandoned casket would reveal secrets that some people in Pine Creek had hoped would stay buried forever. Lily couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her motel bed, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above her, its rhythmic squeaking normally enough to lull her to sleep. But not tonight. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the contents of that casket, the photographs, the jewelry, the documents. She had left everything exactly as she found it, only taking pictures before carefully closing the lid and making her way back up the narrow staircase. The motel alarm clock glowed 3:17 a.m., the same time shown on the stopped clock in the funeral home. Lily sat up and switched on the lamp, then reached for her laptop. She connected her camera and began scrolling through the day's photos, pausing when she reached the ones from the basement. One photo in particular caught her attention, a black and white image of a young couple she had glimpsed inside the casket. The man wore a suit and the woman a simple dress, both standing proudly in front of Hartman's funeral services. Lily zoomed in on their faces, noting their solemn expressions, common in old photographs when exposure times required subjects to hold still for long periods. The building behind them looked new, the paint fresh and the sign clearly readable. "Who were you?" Lily whispered to the screen. "And why were your pictures hidden in a casket?" She zoomed in further, noticing a date stamp in the corner of the photograph, June 12, 1953. Nearly 70 years ago. Whatever story these items told, it had begun long before Lily was born. Sleep wasn't coming tonight. That much was clear. Lily opened her notebook and began jotting down everything she remembered seeing in the casket, the approximate number of photographs, the types of jewelry, the stacks of papers. She hadn't had time to examine anything closely, but even from her brief look, she knew this wasn't just someone's random collection. The items had been deliberately preserved and hidden. By the time morning light filtered through the thin motel curtains, Lily had made a decision. She had to go back. Not just to take more photos, but to properly document what was in that casket. If it contained historical artifacts, they deserved to be preserved. If it held evidence of something more troubling, well, that was another reason to document everything carefully. After a quick shower and a stop at the local diner for coffee and eggs, Lily drove back to the funeral home. The building looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more neglected. Paint peeled from the siding in long strips and vines crept up one side of the porch. It was still early, not quite 8 a.m., and the road remained empty of traffic. This time, Lily came prepared. She brought extra batteries for her flashlight, gloves to handle the delicate items, and a small digital voice recorder to document her observations aloud. She also brought a friend, not a human companion, but a hefty padlock. If she was going to leave these items in place temporarily, she wanted to secure that basement door. The service entrance yielded as easily as it had the day before, and Lily made her way through the funeral home with more confidence, no longer startled by the creaking floorboards or the occasional scurrying sound of a mouse. She found the preparation room quickly, pushed aside the cabinet once more, and descended into the basement. The casket waited exactly as she had left it, undisturbed, in the corner. Lily set up a portable work light she had brought, illuminating the basement far better than her flashlight had. She pulled on her gloves and, with a deep breath, lifted the casket lid once more. "Okay," she said aloud, pressing record on her voice recorder. Second examination of contents found in casket at Hartman Funeral Services, Pine Creek. Today is June 8th, beginning documentation at 8:17 a.m. Working methodically, Lily began to remove items from the casket, placing them carefully on a clean cloth she had spread nearby. Each item was photographed in place before removal, then photographed individually outside the casket. There were 27 photographs in total, ranging from the 1950s through the early 1970s, based on the clothing styles and occasional date stamps. Most featured the same couple she had noticed before, though they aged throughout the series. Some included children, a boy and a girl who grew from toddlers to teenagers across the timeline of photos. A family album, Lily murmured. But why hide your family photos in a casket? The jewelry was modest but personal: a man's wedding band, a woman's engagement ring with a small diamond, a child's charm bracelet, a pocket watch with the initials RH engraved on the back. Family heirlooms, perhaps, rather than items of significant monetary value. The documents proved more intriguing. Birth certificates for Robert Hartman and Virginia Hartman, dated 1930 and 1932. Marriage license for the same, dated 1951. Birth certificates for two children, Thomas and Catherine Hartman, born in 1954 and 1956. The funeral director's family, Lily realized, speaking into her recorder. These are Robert Hartman's personal effects. But as she continued through the documents, the story grew more complex. There were newspaper clippings, most from the Pine Creek Gazette, dating from 1972 and 1973. One headline jumped out immediately. Local mine owner found guilty in safety cover-up. The article detailed how Douglas Wheeler, owner of the Pine Creek Coal Company, had been convicted of falsifying safety reports after a mine collapse killed 3 workers. Another clipping from 6 months later, Wheeler released on appeal, charges dismissed. A smaller article, tucked at the bottom of the page as if the newspaper hadn't wanted to draw attention to it. Beneath these clippings were more personal documents. Letters, most addressed to Robert Hartman. Lily carefully unfolded one, dated October 1973. Mr. Hartman, it began. I trust you understand the consequences of coming forward with your so-called evidence. A man in your position should consider his family before making accusations against respected members of this community. We've been good to you, provided you with steady business. That can change. Everything can change. I suggest you remember your place and keep your mouth shut. It was signed simply, D.W. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she set down the letter. This wasn't just a family collection. It was evidence. But evidence of what? The deeper she dug into the casket's contents, the clearer the picture became. More letters, some threatening, some pleading. Handwritten notes that appeared to be Robert Hartman's personal observations. Statements from miners about unsafe conditions, signed but never filed with any authorities. And most disturbing, what looked like financial records showing payments from Wheeler's company to various town officials. The mayor, the police chief, even a judge. He was gathering evidence, Lily said aloud, though there was no one to hear her. Hartman was building a case against Wheeler and the officials he bribed, but something had stopped him. Another document caught Lily's eye, a death certificate for Virginia Hartman dated November 17, 1973. Cause of death listed as automotive accident. Just weeks after the threatening letter. Lily sat back on her heels, her mind racing. Had Virginia's death been an accident or a warning? Had Robert Hartman hidden his evidence out of fear for his remaining family? The funeral home had continued operating until 2004, more than 30 years after these events. Had he simply kept his silence all those decades? The final items in the casket suggested otherwise. At the very bottom lay a sealed envelope addressed, "To whoever finds this." With careful fingers, Lily opened it and removed several handwritten pages. "To whoever discovers this collection," the letter began. "My name is Robert Hartman. If you are reading this, I am likely dead, and my funeral home has passed out of family hands. I have instructed my children to leave this casket undisturbed should anything happen to me, and to only retrieve these items if justice becomes possible." Lily read on, her heart pounding. Robert Hartman's letter detailed a conspiracy that had controlled Pine Creek for decades, how Wheeler had bought off officials to avoid safety regulations, resulting in numerous deaths beyond the 3 in the famous collapse. How when Hartman had prepared the bodies of dead miners, he had documented injuries inconsistent with the official reports. How when he threatened to expose the truth, his wife's brake lines had been cut. Though the police ruled it an accident, I could not risk my children's lives by coming forward, the letter continued. But neither could I destroy the evidence. So I have preserved it here, in the one place few would think to look, a casket reserved for my own eventual use. If you have found this, I ask that you consider carefully what to do. Some of those named in these documents may still hold power. Some may still be dangerous, but the families of those who died deserve to know the truth. The letter was signed, Robert Hartman, April 2004. Just weeks before the funeral home closed following his death, Lily carefully returned the letter to its envelope, her mind spinning with the implications. This wasn't just a historical curiosity, it was evidence of crimes, of corruption, of possible murder. The people responsible might indeed still be alive, still in positions of power in Pine Creek or beyond. She looked around the basement, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, alone in an abandoned building with evidence that people had killed to suppress. Her first instinct was to pack everything back exactly as she had found it, lock the basement door with her new padlock, and drive straight to the state police barracks. But would they believe her? Would they care about decades-old crimes? And, if some of those involved were still influential, might her report be buried just as Robert Hartman's evidence had been? As Lily carefully began returning the items to the casket, she made another decision. Before going to any authorities, she needed to learn more about Pine Creek, about the mine disaster, about Wheeler and the officials he had bribed, and most importantly about the Hartman family. What had happened to Thomas and Catherine after their father died? Were they still waiting for someone to find the truth their father had hidden? Lily closed the casket lid with a soft thud that echoed in the empty basement. Whatever she decided to do next would change lives, possibly her own most of all. The Pine Creek Public Library was housed in a small brick building that had once been the town's first bank. Despite its size, Lily was surprised to find it well-maintained compared to most other buildings in town. Inside, cool air conditioning offered welcome relief from the June heat. An elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun looked up from the front desk as Lily entered. Her name tag read Beatrice. "Good morning," Lily said with a smile. "I'm doing some research on Pine Creek's history. I'm especially interested in the mining days and the accident in the early 70s. Beatrice's expression shifted slightly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight thinning of her lips. "Historical research, is it? Are you with a university?" "I'm an independent photographer and historian," Lily explained, keeping her tone casual. "I document abandoned places across the country. I've been photographing the old Hartman funeral home." At the mention of Hartman's, Beatrice's posture stiffened. That old place should have been torn down years ago. Nothing but a hazard now. "It's surprisingly well preserved," Lily said. "I'm curious about the owner, Robert Hartman. I understand he ran it until 2004. Beatrice stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "The local history section is in the back corner. Newspapers are on microfilm. Hours are until 5 p.m. With that, she turned and disappeared into a back room. "Thank you," Lily called after her, noting the strange reaction. Perhaps Beatrice had known the Hartmans personally. In a town this small, everyone probably knew everyone else's business. The local history section was modest. 3 shelves of books about Pennsylvania history, with just one slim volume dedicated to Pine Creek itself. Lily took it to a reading table and began skimming through. The book had been published in 1985 and focused primarily on the town's founding and early coal mining success. The mine collapse of 1972 was mentioned in just one paragraph, noting that 3 miners lost their lives in an unfortunate accident. Nothing about safety violations or Douglas Wheeler's trial. The newspaper archives proved more helpful. Lily threaded the microfilm into the reader and began with January 1972, working her way forward. The collapse had occurred in March of that year. The initial coverage was extensive: front-page headlines, photographs of rescue efforts, profiles of the three men who died: James Davis, 34, Peter Kovac, 52, William Thompson, 29. All three left behind families. As weeks passed, the newspaper's tone shifted. Initial reports had mentioned possible safety violations, but later articles focused on human error by the miners themselves. By the time Wheeler was indicted in September, coverage had dwindled to small articles buried in the back pages. His conviction in December received slightly more attention, but by the time his conviction was overturned 6 months later, it warranted just a brief mention. Lily continued scrolling, looking for any mention of Virginia Hartman's death in November 1973. She found it, a small obituary noting that Mrs. Hartman, 41, had died in an automobile accident when her car went off River Road during a rainstorm. She was survived by her husband Robert and children Thomas, 19, and Catherine, 17. The funeral was private, held at Hartman's funeral services. No separate news article about the accident itself. No investigation. Just a brief acknowledgement that a woman's life had ended. Lily sat back, rubbing her eyes after hours of reading microfilm. The pieces were coming together, but she still had many questions. What had happened to the Hartman children? Were they still alive? And what about Douglas Wheeler and the officials he had bribed? She returned to the front desk, where Beatrice had reappeared. "Excuse me, do you have any phone directories for the area? I'm trying to locate someone who might still live locally." Beatrice sighed but pointed to a shelf near the entrance. "Current and past 10 years are there. Thank you. Also, I'm wondering if you know what happened to Thomas and Catherine Hartman. After their father died? They would be in their 60s now." The older woman's eyes narrowed. "Why are you really here, miss? Pine Creek doesn't get historians just passing through." Lily hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I found something at the funeral home that suggests Robert Hartman may have been gathering evidence about the mine collapse and possible corruption. I'm trying to understand what happened." Beatrice glanced around the empty library before leaning forward. "Tommy Hartman left town right after high school. Never came back even for his father's funeral. Catherine married a boy named Paul Wilson and moved to Harrisburg. After Robert died, some corporate outfit bought the funeral home property but never did anything with it." She lowered her voice further. "As for Wheeler, he died rich in Florida about 10 years ago. His son runs the family business now, not mining anymore, but real estate. They own half the county." "What about the local officials from that time?" "Mayor Collins died in '89. Chief Brooks retired to Arizona in the early 2000s. Judge Patterson—" She stopped abruptly as the library door opened and a man in his 40s entered wearing an expensive suit, despite the heat. "Morning, Mrs. Parker," he called. "Is Carol in today? I need to discuss the library funding proposal." "In her office, Mr. Wheeler," Beatrice replied, her demeanor completely changed. Lily felt a chill. Wheeler, the son. "Thank you for your help," Lily said quietly, gathering her notes. "I'll check those directories." The phone books yielded nothing for Thomas Hartman, but she found a listing for Paul and Catherine Wilson in Harrisburg. Lily copied down the number, then left the library, nodding politely to the younger Wheeler as she passed. He gave her a curious glance but said nothing. Back in her motel room, Lily spread her notes across the bed. She had documentary evidence of corruption and possible murder from 50 years ago. Some of those involved were dead, but others, like Wheeler's son, still held power locally, and Catherine Hartman, now Wilson, might be able to confirm what her father had discovered. Lily picked up her phone and dialed the Harrisburg number. A woman answered on the third ring. "Hello? Is this Catherine Wilson? Catherine Hartman Wilson?" A pause. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Lily Chen. I'm a historical photographer documenting abandoned buildings. I've been working at your father's funeral home in Pine Creek." Another, longer pause. "My father's been dead for 20 years, Miss Chen." "I know." I'm calling because I found something there. Something your father left behind. Lily took a deep breath. In a casket in the basement. The silence that followed lasted so long that Lily thought the call had dropped. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice tight with emotion. How did you open it? It was already partially open. No, it wasn't. Catherine's voice had hardened. Dad showed me how he sealed it. It had special locks that looked like decorative elements. It couldn't be partially open unless someone had already broken into it. Lily's mind raced. Mrs. Wilson, I assure you I found it with a gap in the lid. But that's not important right now. What matters is what's inside. Documents about the mine collapse, evidence of bribes, threats against your father, and a letter he wrote explaining how your mother's death wasn't an accident. You need to stop, Catherine said firmly. You have no idea what you're getting into. My brother and I left those papers where they were for a reason. But don't you want the truth to come out? Don't the families of those miners deserve to know what really happened? Those miners' families have moved on. Some are dead themselves. And Wheeler's son has twice the money and connections his father had. Catherine's voice lowered. People who've tried to dig up the past in Pine Creek have a way of meeting with accidents. Like your mother? Lily pressed. I'm hanging up now, Miss Chen. My advice? Leave town, today. Put the papers back and forget what you saw. Wait, your father wanted someone to find those documents. He left instructions. My father was a good man who couldn't let go of what happened to Mom. It consumed him. And he died alone, surrounded by evidence he was too afraid to use. Don't let the same thing happen to you. The line went dead. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in hand. Catherine's warning echoed in her mind, but so did Robert Hartman's letter. The families of those who died deserve to know the truth. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at her motel room door. Lily froze, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. No one knew she was staying here. She had paid cash for the room, a habit from years of traveling to remote locations. The knock came again, more insistent. Slowly, Lily approached the door and looked through the peephole. A young woman in a police uniform stood outside, hand raised to knock again. Lily opened the door partway, keeping the security chain engaged. Can I help you? Miss Chen? I'm Officer Reynolds, Pine Creek Police. She was perhaps 30, with short brown hair and a serious, expression. I understand you've been asking questions about the old Hartman place and the mine collapse. News traveled fast in small towns. Just historical research, Lily said carefully. Mind if I come in? I think there are some things you should know. The officer glanced over her shoulder at the parking lot, a hint of nervousness in her gesture. Against her better judgment, Lily closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. Officer Reynolds stepped inside quickly and closed the door behind her. I don't have much time, she said in a low voice. My grandfather was William Thompson. He died in that mine collapse. Lily's eyes widened. One of the 3 miners. The officer nodded. My father was only 5 when it happened. He spent his whole life believing the official story, that his dad made a mistake that got himself and 2 others killed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. This is them 2 weeks before the collapse. The photo showed 3 men in mining gear, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling despite the coal dust on their faces. My grandmother kept this hidden because it shows the support beams in Section C, the section that collapsed. See how they're different from regulation? Thinner, wider spaced? She pointed to details in the background. Wheeler was cutting corners. My grandmother knew it but couldn't prove it. No one would listen to a miner's widow. And now? Lily asked. And now I'm a cop in a department still influenced by Wheeler money. But if you really found evidence... She let the sentence hang. Lily studied the young officer's face, looking for any sign of deception. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, Reynolds said bluntly. But I've spent my whole career waiting for a chance to clear my grandfather's name. If what you found can do that, I want to help. Lily made a decision. I need to show you something, but not here. Meet me at the funeral home in an hour. Come alone or don't come at all. Reynolds nodded. 1 hour. She handed Lily a business card. My cell's on the back. If anything feels wrong, call me. After the officer left, Lily sat in silence for several minutes, weighing her options. Catherine Wilson had warned her to leave town. Officer Reynolds wanted to see the evidence. And somewhere in Pine Creek, powerful people might already know what she had discovered. She picked up her camera bag and car keys. Whatever happened next, she couldn't leave Robert Hartman's evidence buried any longer. Too many lives had been destroyed by secrets kept in that casket. It was time to open it one last time. The clouds had rolled in by the time Lily reached the funeral home, casting the building in gloomy shadow. She parked her car behind the structure where it wouldn't be visible from the road. A light rain had started to fall, tapping softly on the roof of her station wagon as she gathered her thoughts. She checked her watch, still 20 minutes before Officer Reynolds was due to arrive. Enough time to retrieve some of the key documents from the casket. Lily didn't plan to show the officer everything, at least not yet. Trust needed to be earned, especially in a town where loyalty could be bought. The service entrance yielded as easily as before. Lily moved through the funeral home quickly now, familiar with its layout. The preparation room, the hidden door, the narrow stairs down to the basement, all felt almost routine, though she'd only been here twice before. In the basement, Lily set up her portable light and approached the casket. As she reached for the lid, she froze. Something was different. The thin layer of dust on top had been disturbed, recent fingerprints clearly visible on the polished wood. Someone else had been here. Lily's heart hammered in her chest as she carefully lifted the lid. The contents appeared undisturbed at first. Glance. Photographs still arranged on top, documents beneath. But as she looked closer, she noticed subtle differences. The stack of financial records showing bribes had been rearranged. Robert Hartman's letter was no longer in its envelope but placed on top of the documents. Someone had read everything. Recently. A creak from upstairs sent Lily into instant alert. She wasn't alone in the building. Quickly, she grabbed the most damning evidence, the financial records, the threatening letters, and Hartman's own letter, and stuffed them into her camera bag. She closed the casket lid gently, switched off her light, and listened. Footsteps moved above her, too heavy to be Officer Reynolds. The tread sounded like a man's weight, deliberate and slow, as if searching room by room. Not bothering to be quiet, Lily looked around frantically. The basement had only one exit, the narrow stairs leading back to the preparation room. She was trapped. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. Dust drifted down from the ceiling as the floorboards creaked under the person's weight. They knew where the basement entrance was. Lily backed away from the stairs, deeper into the shadows of the basement. Her hand touched something cold and metal, an old embalming table on wheels. She crouched behind it, making herself as small as possible, and pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course. The sound of the cabinet being moved echoed from above, followed by the distinctive creak of the basement door opening. A beam of light cut through the darkness, sweeping across the floor as someone descended the stairs, heavy footfalls, on the wooden steps. The light swung back and forth, searching. Lily held her breath, pressing herself against the wall behind the metal table. I know you're down here, a man's voice called out. The librarian saw you asking questions then. You called Catherine Wilson. Now you're trespassing on private property. The voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it more frightening. Let's talk about what you found. Lily recognized the voice. The well-dressed man from the library. Wheeler's son. The light swept past her hiding spot without pausing. Wheeler moved further into the basement toward the casket. Interesting choice of storage, he said, running his hand along the casket's lid. My father always said old Hartman was clever, too clever for his own good. He opened the casket and shined his light inside, then let out a small laugh. Looking for these? He held up a stack of papers. I already took the important ones yesterday, after Beatrice called to tell me someone was asking about Hartman and the mine collapse. Lily clutched her camera bag tighter, grateful she'd taken the documents before he arrived. "You can come out now," Wheeler said. "I'm not going to hurt you. That's not how we handle things these days." Lily remained silent, calculating her chances of reaching the stairs before he could catch her. Wheeler sighed. "Fine, have it your way." He closed the casket and walked back toward the stairs, his footsteps fading as he climbed back to the main floor. Lily waited, listening intently. Had he really left? It seemed too easy. After several minutes of silence, she risked peeking out from behind the embalming table. The basement appeared empty, the only light coming from the open door at the top of the stairs. It could be a trap, but staying hidden wasn't an option either. Officer Reynolds would arrive soon, and Lily needed to warn her. Carefully, she emerged from her hiding place and crept toward the stairs, camera bag clutched to her chest. Each step creaked under her weight as she ascended slowly, pausing to listen after each one. At the top, she peered through the doorway, into the preparation room. Empty. The doorway to the main hallway stood open beyond. Lily crossed the preparation room quickly and looked out into the hallway. No sign of Wheeler. Had he really given up so easily? She doubted it. Checking her watch, she saw that Officer Reynolds would arrive any minute. Lily needed to get outside, to warn her before she entered the building. She moved down the hallway, toward the service entrance, every sense on high alert. The door stood slightly ajar, rain pattering against the threshold. Lily approached cautiously, peering through the gap. Her stomach dropped. Wheeler stood just outside talking to a uniformed police officer, but not Reynolds. This was an older man, tall with graying hair at his temples. The name tag on his uniform read, "Chief Garcia, trespassing and possible theft," Wheeler was saying. "My company owns this property, and we have reason to believe she's taken items of value." "We'll handle it, Mr. Wheeler," the chief replied. "If she's still inside, we'll find her." Lily backed away from the door. The front entrance was her only option now. She turned and moved quickly through the funeral home, past the viewing room toward the main lobby. As she reached the front door, she heard the service entrance open, and voices enter the building. "Check upstairs first," the chief called out. "I'll take this floor." The front door was locked, a heavy deadbolt that required a key. Lily looked around desperately for another exit. A window, perhaps? But all the windows on the main floor were too small or barred for security. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. AI text message. She had signal again, at least intermittently. The message was from an unknown number. "Where are you?" "I'm outside." "Reynolds." Lily texted back quickly. "Inside. Wheeler and Chief Garcia here too. Looking for me." "Back window?" The response came seconds later. "On it. 2 minutes." Footsteps approached from the hallway. Lily ducked into a small office, behind the reception desk, closing the door until only a crack remained. Through it she watched as Chief Garcia entered the lobby, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "Miss Chen?" he called out. "This is Chief Garcia, Pine Creek Police. We know you're in the building. Come out now and we can discuss this civilly." Lily held her breath as he moved past her hiding spot, checking behind the reception desk. A soft tap came from the window behind her. She turned to see Officer Reynolds peering in, gesturing for her to open it. The window was stuck, painted shut years ago. Lily pushed against it, putting her weight into the effort. It gave suddenly with a loud crack as decades-old paint split apart. "She's in here," the chief shouted from the lobby. Reynolds helped pull Lily through the window just as the office door burst open behind her. Outside, the rain was falling harder now, quickly soaking through Lily's clothes as Reynolds pulled her toward a police cruiser parked down the block. "Get in," Reynolds ordered, opening the passenger door. "Wait," Lily said. "How do I know I can trust you?" Reynolds looked over Lily's shoulder, her expression tense. "You don't, but right now I'm your only option." The front door of the funeral home slammed open. Wheeler emerged first, followed by Chief Garcia, both scanning the street. Lily made her decision and climbed into the cruiser. Reynolds jumped into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb before Lily had even closed her door. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, clutching her camera bag on her lap. "Somewhere safe," Reynolds replied, eyes on the rearview mirror. "My shift ends in 20 minutes. Garcia can't track the cruiser without raising questions he doesn't want to answer." They drove in tense silence through Pine Creek's nearly empty streets. The small downtown area gave way to residential neighborhoods, then to countryside. Reynolds turned onto a gravel road that wound up into the hills overlooking the town. "My grandmother's house," she explained as they approached a small cabin set back among the trees. "She left it to me when she died. No one knows I kept it." Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen and doors leading to what Lily assumed were bedrooms. Reynolds checked the windows and pulled the curtains closed before turning on any lights. "Let me see what you found," she said, sitting at a wooden table scarred with years of use. Lily hesitated, then opened her camera bag and spread out the documents she'd taken from the casket. Financial records showing bribes to town officials. Threatening letters to Robert Hartman, and this, she handed over Hartman's letter. Reynolds read it slowly, her face growing pale. When she finished, she looked up at Lily with glistening eyes. "My grandfather wasn't responsible. All these years, my family has lived with the shame of thinking he caused that collapse." She touched the letter reverently. "This changes everything." "Maybe," Lily said. "But Wheeler's son already took some of the documents yesterday, and now the police chief is involved. Garcia's new, just 2 years in Pine Creek, but he's deep in Wheeler's pocket." Reynolds stood and paced the small room. "We need to take this higher. State police, maybe the district attorney's office in Harrisburg. Catherine Wilson, Hartman's daughter, warned me to drop this. She said people who dig into the past in Pine Creek have accidents." Reynolds nodded grimly. "Like my partner last year. He was looking into some old case files and died when his house caught fire. Electrical problem officially." A chill ran down Lily's spine. "So what do we do?" "First, we make copies of everything, digital and physical." Reynolds pointed to an old desktop computer in the corner. "Then we need to talk to someone who was there, someone still alive who knew what really happened." "The Hartman children?" "No. Someone else." Reynolds pulled out her phone and showed Lily a photo, an elderly man in a wheelchair, oxygen tubes in his nose. "Frank Doyle. He was the mine foreman in '72. He survived the collapse but with crushed lungs from the coal dust. He's been in Pinewood nursing home for the past 5 years. Wheeler pays his bills, keeping him quiet and comfortable. Frank hasn't talked about the collapse in decades, but he might talk to us, especially if we show him these." She tapped Hartman's letter. Lily looked at the document spread across the table, evidence of crimes committed before she was born, secrets kept for 50 years. "Why does this matter so much to you? Your grandfather's reputation?" Reynolds was quiet for a moment. "Partly, but it's more than that. This town is dying because of the Wheelers. They buy property, let it rot, keep out new businesses unless they get a cut. The mine collapse was just the beginning. They've been poisoning Pine Creek for generations." She looked up at Lily. "You found this evidence for a reason. Don't you think these families deserve justice even after all this time?" The rain drummed on the cabin roof as Lily considered the question. She thought about Robert Hartman, hiding his evidence in a casket, hoping someone would someday find it. About Virginia Hartman, whose death was no accident. About the 3 miners who left behind families that carried the burden of false blame. "Yes," Lily said finally. "They do deserve justice. What's our next move?" Reynolds checked her watch. "We wait until morning. Frank is most lucid in the early hours. We'll visit him first thing, then head straight to the state police barracks in Harrisburg." She gathered up the documents carefully. "For tonight, we should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As Reynolds showed her to the small guest bedroom, Lily wondered if she'd made the right choice. She'd come to Pine Creek to photograph an abandoned building, nothing more. Now she was hiding from the police, carrying evidence of decades-old crimes. preparing to confront powerful people who had already killed to protect their secrets. Yet as she set her camera bag beside the bed, she felt a strange sense of purpose. The images she'd captured inside that abandoned funeral home were more than just photographs of decay. They were pieces of a story that needed to be told. And somehow, she had become part of that story. Lily lay down on the narrow bed, listening to the rain against the windows and Reynolds moving around in the main room. Tomorrow they would seek out the truth. Tonight, she would rest under the weight of secrets finally brought to light. Morning arrived with clear skies, the rain having washed away overnight. Lily woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of paper rustling. She found Officer Reynolds at the kitchen table, documents spread out around her laptop. "I've been organizing everything," Reynolds explained, pushing a mug of coffee toward Lily, creating a timeline from the mine collapse to Hartman's death. Lily sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Find anything new?" "Maybe." Reynolds pointed to a newspaper clipping they hadn't examined closely before. It showed Robert Hartman standing next to a teenage boy at what appeared to be a school award ceremony. The caption read, "Local funeral director Robert Hartman presents Science Award to Michael Wheeler, son of businessman Douglas Wheeler." "Wheeler's son knew the Hartmans," Lily said, studying the photo. "More than that. According to this article, Michael Wheeler worked part-time at the funeral home during high school." Reynolds tapped the paper. "He would have known the building, layout, maybe even knew about the casket. The implications hung in the air between them. Michael Wheeler hadn't stumbled onto their investigation by chance. He'd known exactly what they might find and where to look. We need to talk to Frank Doyle," Lily said. "Today." They arrived at Pinewood Nursing Home just after 8. The facility was nicer than Lily had expected. Well-maintained gardens, large windows letting in morning light, friendly staff at the front desk. Reynolds had called ahead, identifying herself as Frank's great niece. "He's having breakfast in the sunroom," the receptionist told them cheerfully. "He's having a good day today." They found Frank Doyle sitting alone by a window, a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal before him. Despite his oxygen tubes and the wheelchair, his eyes were sharp and alert. He studied them as they approached. "You're not my great niece," he said to Reynolds before they could speak. "I don't have a great niece." "No, sir," Reynolds admitted. "I'm Officer Abby Reynolds. William Thompson was my grandfather." Frank's weathered face showed a flicker of recognition, then caution. "Thompson, one of the men who died in '72. "Yes, sir, and this is Lily Chen. She's a historical photographer who found something important." Reynolds pulled a chair close to Frank. "We need to talk to you about the mine collapse." Frank's gaze darted around the sunroom. "Not here," he said quietly. "My room." Once inside his private room with the door closed, Frank seemed to relax slightly. Photos lined his dresser, younger versions of himself with a woman, children, grandchildren, a life lived despite the injuries that had followed him from the mine. "What did you find?" he asked without preamble. Lily opened her camera bag and removed Robert Hartman's letter, handing it to Frank. This was hidden in a casket in the basement of Hartman Funeral Home. Frank's hands trembled as he read, "Oxygen," hissing steadily through his tubes. When he finished, he closed his eyes for a long moment. "Robert tried to warn us," he finally said. "2 weeks before the collapse, he came to me with concerns about the support beams. Said he'd heard Wheeler taking kickbacks from suppliers for substandard materials." Frank's voice was raspy, but clear. "I reported it to the state inspector. Next day, that inspector was transferred. New guy came in, gave everything a pass." "Why didn't you come forward after the collapse?" Lily asked. Frank looked down at his gnarled hands. "Wheeler visited me in the hospital. Told me my family would be taken care of. Medical bills, college for my kids, pension. Or I could try fighting him and lose everything." He gestured around the room. "Even now he pays for this place. His son visits every month with pictures of my grandkids, reminding me of all they have to lose." "Mr. Doyle," Reynolds said gently, "would you be willing to make a statement to state authorities? With Hartman's evidence and your testimony, We could finally bring this to light. Frank studied her face. You look like him, you know. Your grandfather. Same determination in the eyes. He took a labored breath. I've been waiting 50 years for someone to ask me that question. Yes, I'll tell what I know. They spent the next hour recording Frank's statement on Reynolds's phone. He detailed the safety violations, the bribes, Wheeler's threats. When he described the collapse itself, the sound of timber splitting, the roar of falling rock, the screams of trapped men, tears slid down his weathered cheeks. I've lived half a century carrying this, he said when they finished. Watching Pine Creek die slowly under Wheeler's thumb. Maybe it's too late for justice, but at least the truth can come out. As they prepared to leave, Frank gripped Lily's hand. Robert Hartman was a good man, braver than me. He kept the evidence all those years, waiting for the right time. His eyes were suddenly urgent. Watch yourselves. Michael Wheeler is smarter than his father and twice as ruthless. Outside, as they walked to Reynolds' personal car, she'd left the cruiser behind to avoid being tracked. Lily noticed a black SUV parked across the street. We're being watched, she murmured to Reynolds. I know. Get in quickly. They pulled, away from the nursing home, the SUV following at a distance. Reynolds drove calmly, taking a route toward the highway. State Police Barracks is about an hour away, she said. We just need to get there. And if we don't? Reynolds' grip tightened on the steering wheel. I've sent copies of everything to my academy roommate in Harrisburg. If we don't check in by noon, she takes it all to her captain. The SUV behind them was joined by a second vehicle, a police cruiser with lights flashing. Reynolds swore under her breath. Garcia, she said, checking the rearview mirror. Hold on. She accelerated, taking a sudden turn onto a side road. The cruiser followed, siren now blaring. The SUV dropped back but continued pursuit. We can't outrun them, Lily said, clutching her seat as Reynolds navigated the winding road at speed. Don't need to. Just need to stay ahead until there. Reynolds pointed to a sign for the county line just a quarter-mile ahead. Different jurisdiction. Garcia has no authority there. As they crossed the county line, Reynolds pulled over. The police cruiser stopped behind them, Chief Garcia emerging with his hand on his weapon. The SUV parked further back, Michael Wheeler, watching from behind the wheel. Reynolds stepped out calmly, badge in hand. Morning, Chief. Problem? You're interfering in an active investigation, Reynolds, Garcia said. Hand over whatever you took from the Hartman property. You mean the evidence of corruption and conspiracy to commit murder? Reynolds smiled thinly. I'm afraid that's now in the hands of the state police. In fact, she nodded toward the road behind Garcia, where two state police vehicles had appeared, lights flashing. Here they are now. Lily watched through the windshield as confusion crossed Garcia's face. He turned to see the approaching state troopers, then looked back at Wheeler, who was already turning his SUV around. You set this up, Garcia said to Reynolds. I called in some favors last night. Turns out the state police have been interested in Pine Creek for a while. Just needed someone willing to bring them evidence. Reynolds crossed her arms. It's over, Chief. The next few hours passed in a blur for Lily. State troopers took their statements, collected the documents, and arranged for Frank Doyle to be moved to a secure facility where he could give his testimony without fear of reprisal. Michael Wheeler was taken in for questioning, his face a mask of cold fury as he was led to a police car. By afternoon, Lily and Reynolds sat in a small diner just outside Harrisburg, both exhausted but relieved. What happens now? Lily asked, stirring her untouched coffee. Investigation, charges, maybe trials, though some of these crimes are so old that prosecution will be difficult. Reynolds shrugged. But the truth will come out, that's what matters most. And Pine Creek has a chance now. Without Wheeler's influence, maybe new businesses will come in, maybe people will return. Reynolds smiled slightly. I'm thinking of running for sheriff next year. Lily's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it, surprised to see Catherine Wilson's name. My brother and I are coming to Harrisburg tomorrow, the message read. We want to help. Dad would be proud of what you've done. Lily showed the message to Reynolds, who nodded approvingly. The Hartman children coming home. Seems fitting. Later. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lily stood alone outside the state police barracks. She'd given her final statement, turned over all her evidence, and was now free to leave. Her camera bag felt lighter without the weight of Robert Hartman's secrets. She thought about the abandoned funeral home, the hidden casket, the decades-old evidence preserved inside. She had gone there looking for images of decay and abandonment, for the melancholy beauty of places left behind. Instead, she had found a story of corruption, courage, and the long reach of justice. Her phone chimed with an email notification. A news outlet in Philadelphia was interested in her photographs and story. Other messages had come in throughout the day, from Catherine Wilson with more information about her father, from state police investigators with follow-up questions, from historical societies interested in preserving the Hartman documents. The casket that had held secrets for so long was now empty, its contents exposed to light after decades in darkness. But the story it contained would live on, not just in Lily's photographs but in the lives of everyone touched by the truth it had preserved. She opened her camera and scrolled through the images she had taken that first day. The funeral home's peeling wallpaper, the stopped clock, the preparation room with its silent tools, and finally, the casket itself, its ornate wood gleaming dully in her flashlight beam. "Thank you, Robert," she whispered to the image. "Your wait is over. The truth is finally free." As she lowered her camera, Lily noticed a text from Reynolds. "Nursing home called. Frank wants to talk to you again tomorrow. Says there's more to the story than we know." Lily smiled as she typed her reply. Some stories, it seemed, were never truly finished. There were always more secrets waiting to be uncovered, more truths, hidden in unexpected places. And sometimes all it took to find them was the courage to look inside places others had abandoned. She glanced at the final photo on her camera, the open casket, its contents illuminated by her flashlight. What had shocked her then now felt like the beginning of something important, something that might, in its own small way, help heal a town that had been broken for far too long. Lily put away her camera and headed toward her car. Tomorrow would bring new chapters in this unexpected story. For tonight it was enough to know that justice, however delayed, was finally on its way.